A duke visits his late wife's grave, only to find a governess praying there with a child in her arms. The woman kneeling at Isabel's grave was weeping as though her heart had shattered into 1,000 irretrievable pieces, and in her arms, wrapped in a blanket bearing the Ashford crest, was a child who had Isabel's eyes. Lucian Ashford, Duke of Thornwick, felt the world tilt beneath his boots. 3 years. 3 years since he had buried his wife in this cold earth. 3 years since he had allowed himself to feel anything beyond the numb machinery of duty. And now this stranger, this plain, trembling governess, was sobbing over Isabel's stone as though she had any right to grief that profound, any claim to the memory of a woman she could not possibly have known. But it was the child that made his blood turn to ice. A girl, perhaps 2 years old, with eyes the precise shade of spring violets that had haunted his dreams since the day Isabel closed hers forever. "Who are you?" His voice cut through the November wind like a blade. The woman's head snapped up, terror flooding her face. She clutched the child tighter, and for one wild moment, Lucian thought she might run. Her lips moved soundlessly before words finally emerged, broken and desperate. "Your Grace, I can explain." "Explain?" He descended upon them like judgment itself, his greatcoat billowing behind him. "Explain why you desecrate my wife's grave. Explain why that child wears my family's crest. Explain why she has Isabel's eyes." The governess rose on shaking legs, and he saw she was younger than he'd first thought, perhaps 25, with dark hair escaping from beneath a threadbare bonnet and a face that would have been unremarkable if not for the absolute devastation written across it. "Because she is yours, Your Grace," the woman whispered. "This is Lady Caroline Ashford, your daughter." The earth did not split open. The sky did not fall. But Lucian felt his carefully constructed world. 3 years of controlled grief, of measured steps through a life drained of color, crack down the center like a mirror struck by a stone. "That," he said with deadly calm, "is impossible. Wait, before the next confession unfolds. If this story has already stirred your heart, tell us where you're watching from. To make sure you don't miss the next betrayal, kiss, or redemption, subscribe and join our circle. The next heartbeat might change everything. Now, back to the scene. The governess, Miss Eleanor Hartley, she would later tell him, though in that moment she was simply the woman who had torn open his carefully sealed wounds, stood before him with the child in her arms and spoke words that should have been impossible. Lady Isabel carried this child in secret, Eleanor said, her voice steadier now, as though having delivered the blow she had found some reservoir of strength. She hid her condition from everyone at Thornwick Manor. Everyone except me. "You?" Lucian's laugh was bitter, hollow. "I knew every servant in my household. I have never seen you before in my life." "No, Your Grace, you wouldn't have." Eleanor shifted the child. Caroline, she had called her, as if she had any right to name what could not possibly exist. "I was not at Thornwick. I served Lady Isabel before her marriage, in her father's house. She wrote to me when she discovered her condition. She was terrified." "Terrified? Isabel was my wife. If she carried my child, why—" But his words died, because he knew. God help him, he knew. Their marriage had been correct, proper, cold as the marble beneath Isabel's coffin. An arrangement between great houses, consummated with duty, not desire. They had shared a bed perhaps a dozen times in 2 years of marriage, each encounter a choreographed dance of obligation. And then Isabel had taken ill, or so he had been told, and retreated to her family's estate for her health. She had died there. Pneumonia, the doctor said. He had received word by messenger, had arrived too late even for her final breath. Her father, the Earl of Pemberton, had already arranged everything. The coffin was sealed. Lucian had buried his wife without ever seeing her face one last time. She died in childbirth, Eleanor said quietly, as if reading his thoughts. Not pneumonia. The Earl could not bear the scandal of it, that his daughter died bringing a child into the world when she had been married 2 years and shown no signs of conception before. He feared people would whisper that the child was not legitimately conceived. But you're saying it was. Lucian's words were flat, each one weighted with disbelief. Lady Caroline was born 6 weeks premature. Lady Isabel's condition could have been missed in its early months, especially if she was careful about her dress and habits. The Earl was convinced the premature birth would fuel speculation, so Eleanor's voice dropped to barely a whisper. He told everyone it was pneumonia. He sent the child away with me. He paid me to disappear, to raise her in obscurity, to never speak the Ashford name. Then why are you here? The question emerged as a growl. Why bring her to this place, to me, if you were paid to vanish? Eleanor's eyes, gray, he noticed, the color of winter seas, met his without flinching. Because I am dying, Your Grace. The words hung in the cold November air between them. Caroline stirred in Eleanor's arms, making a small sound of protest at the tension she could sense but not understand. The physicians give me perhaps 6 months. Consumption. Eleanor's free hand rose to her chest, a brief, unconscious gesture. I have no family, no means beyond what the Earl provided, and that money is nearly spent on my care. I cannot leave this child to the mercy of a parish orphanage or a workhouse. Whatever her grandfather feared, whatever shame he imagined, she is innocent of it all. She is your daughter, Your Grace, your blood. She deserves the protection of your name and the inheritance that is rightfully hers. Lucian stared at the child, at Caroline. She was watching him now with those impossible violet eyes, her small face solemn beneath a halo of dark curls. Isabel's curls, Isabel's eyes, but the shape of her face, the set of her jaw. This is madness, he said, but his voice had lost its edge. Do you have proof? Any proof beyond a story and a child who happens to resemble? I have Lady Isabel's letters. Eleanor reached into the worn leather bag at her feet with her free hand, withdrawing a bundle of papers tied with a faded ribbon. Every one she sent me, from the first when she discovered her condition, to the last, written 3 days before Caroline's birth. She speaks of you in them, Your Grace. She speaks of your marriage, of Thornwick Manor, of details no one outside your household could know. Lucian took the letters with hands that had gone numb. The handwriting on the first envelope was achingly familiar. Isabel's precise, elegant script. My dearest Eleanor, I write to you in the greatest distress, and with news I dare not share with another living soul. He could not read more. Not here, not in this place with this woman and this child watching him. Not standing over Isabel's grave with the evidence of how thoroughly he had failed her, growing cold in his hands. Come with me, he said abruptly, to Thornwick, both of you. Eleanor's eyes widened. Your Grace, I did not come to impose upon your household. I only wanted you to know of Caroline's existence, to perhaps make some arrangement. You brought me a child you claim is my daughter and my heir, Lucian interrupted. Did you think I would simply acknowledge her existence with a nod and send you both back to where? Some rented room in the village? Some charitable institution? He shook his head. No. If there is even a chance that what you say is true, then Caroline belongs at Thornwick, and you, Miss Hartley, will remain there until we have determined the truth of this matter, and until we have secured Caroline's future beyond the time you have remaining. He could not bring himself to say the word death. It seemed obscene, standing in this graveyard where death had already taken too much. Eleanor swayed slightly, and Lucian realized with a start that she was not merely emotionally overwrought, she was physically weakening. The walk from the village must have taxed her failing strength. "Can you make it to the carriage?" he asked, his tone gentler than before. "Yes," Eleanor said, but her voice was thin, and the child in her arms seemed suddenly too heavy a burden. Without allowing himself to think, Lucian reached out. "Give her to me." For a moment, Eleanor hesitated, her arms tightening protectively around Caroline. Then, slowly, she transferred the child into his hands. The weight of her was astonishing. Not heavy, but significant in a way that had nothing to do with physical mass. Caroline regarded him with those violet eyes, curious now rather than wary. One small hand reached out and grasped his cravat, tugging with surprising strength. "Papa?" she said, the word uncertain, questioning. Lucian felt something crack inside his chest, some barrier he had built brick by careful brick over 3 years of grief and isolation. "Come," he said roughly, and turned toward the path that led down from the hilltop cemetery to where his carriage waited. Eleanor followed, her steps unsteady but determined. Behind them, Isabel's gravestone stood silent witness to the impossible reunion she had never lived to see. Thornwick Manor rose from the Yorkshire moors like a Gothic cathedral, all grey stone and severe angles, its windows gleaming coldly in the late afternoon sun. Eleanor had seen it once before, years ago, when she had accompanied Lady Isabel on a visit before the marriage. Then it had seemed imposing but not hostile. Now, arriving as a dying woman with a child who might tear apart the carefully ordered world of the Duke of Thornwick, it looked like a fortress designed to repel invaders. The servants who greeted them in the entrance hall made no effort to hide their shock. Their master had left that morning on his customary solitary visit to the cemetery. He had returned with a sickly-looking woman in servant's dress and a child. "Mrs. Winters," Lucian addressed his housekeeper, a formidable woman in her 5th decade with steel-gray hair and a bearing that suggested she had run the manor through sheer force of will during its master's years of grief. "Please, prepare the blue suite for Miss Hartley and the child. Have fires lit and a warm meal sent up immediately." "Your Grace?" Mrs. Winters' voice carried precisely calibrated surprise. "The blue suite is a family apartment." "I am aware of its status, Mrs. Winters. I chose it deliberately." Lucian's tone brooked no argument. "This is Miss Eleanor Hartley. The child is Miss Caroline. They are to be treated as honored guests. See that they want for nothing." The housekeeper's eyes flickered to Caroline, still perched in Lucian's arms, and Eleanor saw the moment recognition struck. The violet eyes, the dark curls, the unmistakable echo of the late Duchess. "Of course, Your Grace," Mrs. Winters said, her voice carefully neutral. "I shall see to it immediately." "And Mrs. Winters." Lucian waited until the housekeeper met his eyes. "Discretion, from every member of this household. I will explain the situation when I am ready. Until then, curiosity is to be suppressed with absolute firmness. Understood, Your Grace." Eleanor followed the housekeeper up the grand staircase, her legs trembling with exhaustion. She had not eaten since early morning, and the journey from London on the mail coach had taken 2 days. She had spent her last coins on the ticket, gambling everything on this desperate mission. The blue suite, when Mrs. Winters opened its doors, took Eleanor's breath away. It consisted of a sitting room decorated in pale blue and cream, with enormous windows overlooking the moors, a bedroom with a canopied bed large enough for 3 people, and a smaller adjoining room that had clearly once been a nursery. Fresh flowers stood in crystal vases despite the lateness of the season, and a fire already crackled in the grate. "This was the Duchess's suite," Mrs. Winters said quietly, watching Eleanor's face. "Before her illness. The Duke has kept it maintained but unused since her death. Eleanor's throat tightened. To be given these rooms felt like both an honor and an accusation. Mrs. Winters, I want you to understand, I did not come here seeking advantage or what you came seeking is between you and His Grace, the housekeeper interrupted, not unkindly. But I will tell you this, Miss Hartley. I served the Duchess from the day she arrived at Thornwick as a bride. She was a good woman, though an unhappy one. And if that child is hers, Mrs. Winters glanced at Caroline, who had settled onto a cushioned window seat and was watching the moors with fascination. Well, then perhaps some good can come from tragedy after all. A maid arrived with a tray of soup, bread, cheese, and tea. Mrs. Winters directed her to set it on the table near the fire, then departed with a promise to return with clothing suitable for Caroline and nightgowns for Eleanor. Eleanor sat carefully in one of the upholstered chairs, suddenly aware of how inappropriate she must look in these elegant surroundings. Her dress was clean but worn, patched in places, the dress of a woman who had learned to make every penny stretch. The chair beneath her probably cost more than she had earned in the last year. Ellie? Caroline had turned from the window, her small face anxious. Stay? Yes, darling, we're staying. Eleanor held out her arms, and Caroline climbed into her lap, burrowing against her chest. We're safe now. But even as she spoke the words, Eleanor wondered if they were true. She had gambled everything on the Duke's honor, on the assumption that faced with evidence of his daughter's existence, he would do the right thing. But she had also seen the hardness in his face, the walls he had built against feeling. What if he rejected Caroline's claim? What if he decided the scandal of acknowledging an heir who appeared from nowhere was worse than the sin of abandoning his own blood? And, more pressingly, what if Isabel's father, the Earl of Pemberton, discovered what Eleanor had done? He had paid her handsomely to disappear, had made it clear that any attempt to contact the Duke or claim Caroline's heritage would result in consequences she could not imagine. Eleanor had defied him out of desperation and love for the child she had raised as her own. But the Earl was a powerful man with reach far beyond his own estates. A knock at the door interrupted her spiraling thoughts. She expected Mrs. Winters or a maid. Instead, the Duke himself entered, carrying a leather case that she recognized as a physician's bag. Dr. Ashton is away visiting a tenant, Lucian said without preamble, but he will return this evening. I would have him examine you, Miss Hartley. That's not necessary, Your Grace. I have seen physicians in London. The diagnosis is certain. Nevertheless, he set the bag on a side table, then turned to face her fully. Caroline had fallen asleep against Eleanor's chest, worn out by the day's upheaval. I have questions, Miss Hartley, many questions. But they can wait until you have rested and eaten. For now, I have only one thing to ask of you. Eleanor tensed. Yes, Your Grace? Tell me about her. He nodded toward Caroline. Tell me about my daughter, if she is my daughter. The caveat was automatic, but his eyes, dark blue, she noticed now, like deep water, held something that might have been longing. Tell me who she is. Eleanor looked down at the sleeping child, at the face that had become as dear to her as her own life. She is bright, she said softly, curious about everything. She learned to walk early and has been trying to run ever since. She loves stories, especially ones with animals. She's fearless in ways that terrify me. She'll climb anything, explore anywhere, if I don't watch her constantly. A ghost of something that might have been a smile touched Lucian's stern mouth. That sounds like something a child should be. She asks about her mother sometimes. I've told her that her mama loved her very much, but had to go away. She seems to understand, in the way children do, that her mother won't be coming back. Eleanor's voice caught. She started asking about her papa. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know if you would want. I don't know what I want, Lucian interrupted. Or perhaps I know too well and am afraid of it. He moved to the window, looking out at the moors that stretched wild and dark toward the horizon. For 3 years, I have lived with the knowledge that I failed Isabel, that our marriage was a beautiful cage in which she slowly withered. I did my duty. I was faithful and respectful and provided every material comfort. But I did not make her happy. I did not know how. The confession hung in the air between them, raw and unexpected. She wrote about you in her letters, Eleanor said quietly, not with anger or resentment, with sadness mostly. She said you were a good man trapped in the same cage as her. She said you both deserved better than what your families had arranged. Lucian turned from the window, his face a study in controlled anguish. And yet, she did not tell me when she found herself with child. She did not trust me enough to share even that. I think she was afraid, Eleanor said. Not of you, of failing you, of producing an heir who came too early and prompted gossip, of being another disappointment in a marriage built on duty. She paused, then added, and I think, perhaps, she wanted to protect Caroline from the coldness she herself had experienced. She wanted her daughter to know love, even if it meant sacrificing everything else. So she gave her to you. Yes. Eleanor met his eyes steadily, and I have loved her as if she were my own. I would die for her, Your Grace. In fact, I suppose I am dying for her, in a way, using my last strength to secure her future. Lucian was silent for a long moment. Then he said, You understand that I must verify your claims, that I will read Isabel's letters, make inquiries, ensure that this is not some elaborate deception. I would expect nothing less. Caroline deserves a father who is certain of her, not one who acknowledges her out of mere obligation or social pressure. And if I am certain, his voice dropped, if I read these letters and find the truth in them, what then, Miss Hartley? You have brought me a daughter I never knew existed. You are dying and will leave her in my care. Do you truly believe a man who could not make his wife happy is fit to raise a child alone? I believe, Eleanor said carefully, that Lady Isabel trusted you more than you know. And I believe that love, real love, not duty, can be learned, even by dukes. For the first time since she had met him at the cemetery, Lucian Ashford smiled. It was a sad, broken thing, but it was genuine. Rest, Miss Hartley, he said, turning toward the door. We have much to discuss, but it can wait until tomorrow. Tonight, let there be peace, at least. He was gone before Eleanor could respond, leaving her alone with the sleeping child and the fading light of a winter afternoon that had changed everything. Lucian did not sleep that night. He sat in his study with Isabel's letters spread before him, reading by candlelight as the hours crept toward dawn. Each page was a knife wound, precisely placed. I find myself terrified to tell him, Eleanor. What if he is disappointed? What if this child, coming so late and so unexpectedly, is not the heir he hoped for? Our marriage has been so carefully polite, so devoid of genuine warmth. I fear adding this complication to an arrangement that already feels like a beautiful trap. The child moves within me now, and I feel such fierce love for this being I have not yet met. I want her to know joy, Eleanor. I want her to know that she is wanted and cherished, not merely tolerated as an heir and a duty. Perhaps that is selfish of me, to want for my daughter what I could not have for myself. I have made my decision. I will write to Papa and tell him I must spend the winter at Pemberton Hall for my health. Lucian will not question it. We have grown so accustomed to this distance between us. And when the child comes, I will send her with you, my dearest friend. You will love her as I love her. You will give her the warmth and devotion that I fear she would never find in this cold, correct house. If I die in this birthing, Eleanor, know that my last thoughts will be of you and my child, not of duty or propriety or the great house and title I leave behind. I die knowing that my daughter will be loved. That is enough. That must be enough." Lucian's hands shook as he set down the final letter. Isabel had known she might die, had prepared for it, had chosen to send their daughter away rather than let her be raised in the emotional wasteland of Thornwick Manor. And the worst part, the part that made Lucian want to drive his fist through the wall or scream into the indifferent darkness, was that she had been right to fear. He would have failed Caroline, just as he had failed Isabel. He would have loved her with the same cold correctness, the same careful distance, the same inability to bridge the gap between duty and genuine affection. But things were different now. He was different, hollowed out by grief perhaps, but also emptied of the pride and rigidity that had made him such a poor husband. 3 years of mourning had burned away everything but essential truth. Life was short, love was precious, and he had wasted his one chance at both. He would not waste this second chance, not with Caroline. A soft knock at the study door pulled him from his reverie. "Enter." Mrs. Winters appeared, her face grave. "Your Grace, forgive the intrusion, but there is a situation that requires your immediate attention." Lucian was on his feet instantly. "Miss Hartley, the child?" "They are well, Your Grace, but a messenger arrived an hour ago from Pemberton Hall. The Earl requests your immediate presence. He says it concerns a matter of grave importance regarding the late Duchess." Ice formed in Lucian's veins. "The Earl knows. He knows Eleanor is here." "It would appear so, Your Grace." Mrs. Winters' expression was carefully neutral. "What would you have me tell the messenger?" Lucian looked down at the letters scattered across his desk. Evidence of secrets kept, choices made, lives irrevocably altered by the machinations of powerful men who valued reputation over truth. "Tell him," Lucian said slowly, "that I will call upon him tomorrow afternoon. And, Mrs. Winters, have the grooms prepare my fastest carriage. If the Earl thinks he can intimidate me into complicity with his deceptions, he is about to learn otherwise." "Very good, Your Grace." The housekeeper paused at the door. "If I may be so bold, the child is lovely."
"She has the Duchess's eyes." "Yes," Lucian said softly, "she does." When Mrs. Winters had gone, Lucian stood at the window, watching the sky lighten toward dawn. Somewhere above him, Eleanor and Caroline were sleeping in Isabel's rooms, his daughter, his impossible, unwanted, absolutely miraculous daughter. And somewhere to the south, the Earl of Pemberton was plotting how to make this problem disappear. Lucian smiled grimly at his reflection in the dark glass. Let the Earl plot. Let him scheme and threaten and deploy every weapon in his considerable arsenal. None of it would change the essential truth that Lucian had learned from reading his dead wife's letters. Caroline was his daughter, his heir, his last gift from a woman he had failed to cherish while she lived, and he would move heaven and earth to protect her. Eleanor woke to sunlight streaming through the tall windows and a small hand patting her face with increasing insistence. "Ellie! Ellie, wake! Hungry!" She sat up carefully, mindful of the heaviness in her chest that was worse in the mornings. Caroline stood beside the bed in her nightgown, her dark curls a wild halo around her face. "Good morning, darling. Let's get you dressed, shall we?" Someone, Mrs. Winters probably, had laid out clothing on the chair near the bed. A simple day dress for Eleanor in deep gray wool, and for Caroline, a child's frock in soft blue with delicate embroidery at the collar. Both garments were of far finer quality than anything Eleanor could have afforded.
She dressed Caroline first, marveling as she always did at how the child had grown. 2 years old now, and changing every day. How much of this precious, fleeting time would Eleanor be granted? How many more mornings would she wake to that small hand patting her face? "Don't think about it," she told herself fiercely. "One day at a time, 1 hour at a time, if necessary." A knock at the door announced a maid with a breakfast tray, porridge with cream and honey for Caroline, toast and tea for Eleanor. The girl bobbed a curtsy and informed them that His Grace requested their presence in the morning room at 10 o'clock, if Miss Hartley felt well enough. "Tell His Grace we will be there," Eleanor said, injecting confidence she did not feel into her voice. The morning room, when they found it with the help of a footman, was a smaller, more intimate space than Eleanor had expected. Large windows overlooked a rose garden, dormant now for winter, but still elegant in its bare architecture. The Duke stood with his back to them, hands clasped behind him as he stared out at the garden. "Your Grace," Eleanor said quietly, "we came as you requested." Lucian turned, and Eleanor was shocked by his appearance. He looked as though he had not slept, his eyes shadowed and his face drawn with exhaustion. But there was something else there too, a fierce, determined light that had not been present the day before. "Miss Hartley, Caroline." He moved toward them, and Eleanor noticed he dropped to one knee so he was at Caroline's eye level. "Good morning, little one. Did you sleep well?" Caroline regarded him solemnly, then nodded. "Big bed, soft." "I'm glad." Lucian glanced up at Eleanor. "I read the letters, all of them." Eleanor's heart stuttered. And I believe you. I believe Caroline is my daughter." He stood slowly, his eyes never leaving Eleanor's face. "More than that, I know it. There are details in those letters, Miss Hartley, that no one outside my immediate household could have known. Private conversations, personal habits, the layout of rooms that were never described in letters to Isabel's family. She was telling the truth, which means Caroline is the legitimate heir to the Thornwick title and estates." Relief flooded through Eleanor with such force that her knees weakened. She reached for the back of a chair to steady herself.
"But," Lucian continued, his voice hardening, "there are complications. I received word last night that the Earl of Pemberton has learned of your presence here. He requests my immediate attendance at Pemberton Hall." Oh, God! Eleanor sank into the chair, her mind racing. He'll try to take her back. He'll say I stole her or that I'm making false claims. Your Grace, you must understand. The Earl paid me a considerable sum to disappear with Caroline. If he believes I've betrayed that agreement, he has no claim on her, Lucian said flatly. Caroline is my daughter and my heir. The Earl's opinions on the matter are irrelevant. But he's powerful. He can make trouble for you, for Caroline. Let him try. Lucian's voice was quiet but carried absolute conviction. I am going to Pemberton Hall this afternoon. I am going to make it clear to the Earl that Caroline's heritage will be publicly acknowledged. But before I go, I need to make arrangements, legal arrangements, to secure Caroline's position and your own. My own? Eleanor blanked. Your Grace, I don't need. You are dying, Miss Hartley. You said 6 months, perhaps less. In that time, Caroline will need you as she adjusts to her new life. And when you— He paused, seeming to gather himself. When you are gone, I want to ensure you leave this world knowing that Caroline is protected legally and financially. That means formal recognition of her legitimacy, appointment of proper guardians should anything happen to me, and an endowment of funds in trust for her future. And what about the scandal? Eleanor asked quietly. What about the questions people will ask about where she's been, why she was kept secret? Let them ask.
The truth is simple enough. Isabel's father feared scandal and made choices that I am now correcting. I will not elaborate beyond that, and I will not allow my daughter to be touched by gossip or speculation. He looked at Eleanor steadily. But I need your help, Miss Hartley. I need to teach me how to be what Caroline needs. You've been her mother for 2 years. You know her in ways I never will. I'm asking you to stay at Thornwick, not as a governess or a dependent, but as family, for however long you have. Eleanor felt tears prick her eyes. You would do that? Grant me such a place? You brought me my daughter, Lucian said simply. You cared for her when her own grandfather would have hidden her away in shame. You sacrificed your health and your resources to ensure her survival. Why would I grant you anything less? Caroline, who had been watching this exchange with the intense focus of a child who understands that something important is happening, even if the details escape her, suddenly tugged on Lucian's coat. "Papa?" The word fell into the room like a stone into still water, rippling outward with implications neither adult had fully prepared for. Lucian went very still, then slowly, carefully, lowered himself to one knee again. "Yes, Caroline, I'm your papa." "Papa, stay? Not go away?" Eleanor saw something crack in the Duke's carefully controlled expression. "No, sweetheart, Papa's not going away. Papa is going to stay right here with you." Caroline considered this, then nodded as if satisfied. "Good," she announced, and returned her attention to the wooden horse one of the maids had found for her, apparently considering the matter settled. Lucian rose, and Eleanor saw him press a hand briefly to his chest, as though something there had suddenly become too large to contain. "My solicitor arrives this afternoon," he said, his voice rough. "We'll draw up the necessary documents, and then I'm going to pay a visit to the Earl and make certain he understands that Caroline is under my protection now. His secrets and his schemes end today." "Be careful," Eleanor said. "The Earl is not a man who accepts defeat gracefully." "Neither am I." Lucian's smile was sharp as a blade. "But I have something he doesn't, Miss Hartley." "I have the truth, and I have nothing left to lose." Pemberton Hall was a sprawling estate of honey-colored stone, less austere than Thornwick, but equally imposing. Lucian had been here only twice before, once to negotiate his marriage to Isabel, and once to bury her. Neither visit had left pleasant memories. The Earl received him in his study, a room heavy with dark wood and darker secrets. Marcus Pemberton was in his 60s, silver-haired and distinguished, with the kind of face that looked as though it had been carved from granite and polished to aristocratic perfection. "Thornwick," the Earl said, not rising from his desk. "I had hoped this visit would not be necessary." "And I had hoped you would have told me the truth about my wife's death." Lucian did not wait for an invitation to sit. He took the chair opposite the Earl's desk and met the older man's eyes without flinching. "But it seems we're both destined for disappointment." "I protected my daughter's reputation, and yours." The Earl's voice was cold. "Isabel died in disgrace, bearing a child so prematurely that it prompted questions about its legitimacy. I spared you that scandal, Thornwick. I gave you a clean grief and a sealed coffin. I would think you'd have the grace to be grateful." "Grateful?" Lucian leaned forward, his voice deadly quiet. "You let me believe my wife died of pneumonia. You let me bury her without seeing her face one last time. You sent my daughter away to be raised in secrecy by a hired companion. And you expect gratitude?" "I expect common sense." The Earl's fist came down on the desk. "The child was born 6 weeks early. Do you know what people would have said? That she was not yours. that Isabel had been unfaithful, that the Ashford line was tainted with bastard blood. I saved you from that boy. I saved your family name and your wife's memory. By lying, by stealing my daughter. By paying Miss Hartley to disappear with Caroline as if she were some shameful secret to be buried. Miss Hartley. The Earl's lips curled with contempt. That grasping little leech came to you, did she? I should have known she'd try to extort more money once her original sum ran out. She came to me because she's dying, Lucian said, his voice vibrating with controlled fury. She came to me because she loves my daughter and wants to secure Caroline's future before it's too late. She came to me with truth, Pemberton, something you singularly failed to provide. Truth? The Earl laughed bitterly. You want truth? Very well. Your marriage to my daughter was a disaster. She was miserable. You were distant. The child was an accident that occurred during one of your rare intimate moments. When Isabel discovered her condition, she wrote to me in terror, begging me not to tell you because she was convinced you would be disappointed or disgusted. I tried to persuade her otherwise, but she was adamant. So I honored her wishes. I let her come home. I cared for her through her lying in. And when she died, when she bled to death bringing your daughter into this world, I made the choices I thought would protect everyone involved. The words hit Lucian like physical blows. Isabel, terrified to tell him about their child. Isabel, bleeding to death while giving him an heir he never knew existed. Isabel, making her father promise to send Caroline away because she believed Thornwick Manor held no love for unexpected daughters. You were wrong, Lucian said, his voice hoarse. Your choices were wrong. Isabel was wrong to fear me, but I gave her reason to fear. Our marriage was cold and correct, and everything a good marriage should not be. But she still deserved truth. I deserved truth. And Caroline deserves to know her father and claim her birthright. And what do you propose to do? The Earl's eyes glittered dangerously. Acknowledge the child publicly? Invite speculation about her origins and her mother's virtue? Drag our family's names through every gossip column in England? I propose to acknowledge my daughter, period. Lucian stood, using his full height to dominate the space. I will not elaborate on the circumstances of her birth beyond what is necessary. I will not blacken Isabel's name or yours. But neither will I hide Caroline away like a shameful secret. She is Lady Caroline Ashford, legitimate heir to the Thornwick title, and anyone who questions that will answer to me. You'll be ruined, the Earl said flatly. Society will whisper, they'll speculate, they'll tear apart every detail of your marriage looking for scandal. Let them. Lucian moved toward the door. I have spent 3 years living in a mausoleum of my own making, Pemberton. I have mourned a wife I never properly knew and wasted time I cannot recover. I will not waste another moment worrying about what society thinks. I have a daughter who needs me. That is the only truth that matters. He was halfway out the door when the Earl's voice stopped him. Thornwick, wait! Lucian turned. The Earl had aged in the last few minutes, his granitic facade cracking to reveal something almost human beneath. Does the child look like her? Like Isabel? Yes, Lucian said quietly. She has her mother's eyes. The Earl nodded slowly, his own eyes suspiciously bright. I did love my daughter, you know. Everything I did to protect her memory. But perhaps, he paused, swallowing hard, Perhaps I protected the wrong things. Perhaps, Lucian agreed. But it's not too late, Pemberton. Caroline is your grandchild. You could know her if you wished, but only if you swear to support her legitimacy without reservation. I won't have her exposed to doubt or shame, even from family." The Earl was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "Bring her to visit. Soon. I would like to meet her." Lucian nodded once and left Pemberton Hall with a lighter step than when he'd arrived. He had expected a battle, had been prepared for threats and ultimatums. Instead, he'd found a grieving father who had made terrible choices out of misguided love. Perhaps, Lucian thought as his carriage rolled through the gathering dusk, everyone in this tragedy had been trying to do the right thing and failing spectacularly at it. Isabel, hiding her pregnancy out of fear. The Earl, concealing her death to prevent scandal. Eleanor, raising Caroline in secret rather than risk the rejection of a father who'd never known his daughter existed. And himself, Lucian Ashford, Duke of Thornwick, who had failed his wife so thoroughly that she died terrified to tell him he was going to be a father. But that was the past. The future began now, with a 2-year-old girl who had her mother's eyes and her father's second chance at everything that mattered. Eleanor was in the nursery with Caroline when Lucian returned. The room had been transformed in his absence. Mrs. Winters, with her characteristic efficiency, had aired it out, brought in fresh toys from storage, and even located a rocking horse that had once belonged to Lucian himself. Caroline was riding it enthusiastically, making clip-clop sounds and chattering about horses and adventures. Eleanor sat nearby, watching with the kind of bittersweet attention of someone trying to memorize every precious detail. "How did it go?" she asked when Lucian appeared in the doorway. "Better than expected, worse than hoped." He moved into the room, drawn despite himself to watch Caroline's spirited horseplay. The Earl admitted everything. He also wants to meet Caroline, if you're willing. Eleanor's eyes widened. He would acknowledge her? He will support her legitimacy without reservation. I made certain of that. Lucian watched as Caroline noticed his presence and waved enthusiastically while maintaining her grip on the rocking horse. "My solicitor came while I was gone. The documents are drawn up. Caroline is formally recognized as my legitimate heir. A trust has been established for her future. And you, Miss Hartley, have been named as her guardian in the event of my death, with an annual income guaranteed for as long as you need it." "Your Grace, that's too generous." "It's not enough," Lucian interrupted. "It will never be enough to repay what you've done, but it's what I can offer." Eleanor was quiet for a moment, watching Caroline rock back and forth with pure childhood joy. Then she said softly, "She'll need you to teach her about her mother. I never knew Lady Isabel the way you did. I can tell Caroline about the woman who wrote me letters, who was kind and thoughtful and desperately wanted her daughter to be loved. But you knew her in ways I never will." "I'm not sure I knew her at all," Lucian admitted. "Our marriage was a desert. We were two strangers, sharing a house and a name, and nothing more meaningful than that. But I'm learning about her now, through her letters. And I'll share everything with Caroline when she's old enough to understand." "Papa!" Caroline had dismounted from the rocking horse and was toddling toward him with determined steps. "Papa, watch!" She proceeded to demonstrate her climbing skills on a cushioned ottoman, scaling it with the fearless determination Eleanor had described. Lucian found himself holding his breath, ready to catch her if she fell, but she made the summit successfully and stood atop it with her arms raised in triumph. "Well done," Lucian said, and meant it with an intensity that surprised him. "More," Caroline announced, and prepared to climb down for another attempt. Eleanor laughed, and the sound was like sunlight breaking through clouds. "She's quite proud of that particular skill."
Last week, she climbed onto the kitchen table while I was fetching water. I found her sampling the butter. A fearless adventurer already. Lucian couldn't take his eyes off his daughter. Each gesture, each expression was a revelation. She doesn't know me yet. Not really. But she will, Miss Hartley. I swear to you, I will be the father Isabel feared I couldn't be. I believe you, Eleanor said simply. They spent the rest of the afternoon in the nursery, an unlikely trio bound together by love for a child who represented both a tragedy and a miracle. Eleanor showed Lucian how Caroline liked her stories told, with dramatic voices and hand gestures. Lucian found himself on the floor acting out the parts of various farm animals, while Caroline giggled with delight. It was only when Caroline finally tired and curled up against Eleanor for a nap that Lucian noticed how pale Eleanor had become, how her breathing had grown shallow and labored. "You need to rest," he said quietly. "In a moment. She sleeps better if I hold her for a while first." Eleanor's hand stroked Caroline's dark curls with infinite gentleness. "Your Grace, Lucian, if I may be so bold, when I'm gone, don't." "When I'm gone," Eleanor continued firmly, "she'll be frightened and confused. She won't understand why I'm not there anymore. You'll need to be patient with her. She may cry for me in the night. She may be angry or withdrawn. But beneath all of that, she's resilient and brave. Give her time, and she'll learn to trust you the way she trusts me." "How much time?" The question emerged rougher than Lucian intended. "How long do we have?" The physician said 6 months, but I can feel myself weakening faster than they predicted. Perhaps 3 months, perhaps less. Eleanor met his eyes without flinching. "I'm not afraid for myself, Your Grace. I've made my peace with what's coming. But I'm terrified for Caroline. Losing me will be the first great grief of her life, and she's so small to bear it." "She won't bear it alone." Lucian heard the promise in his own voice and felt its weight. "I'll be there, every day, every night, for however long it takes. She's my daughter, Miss Hartley. I've only known her 2 days, but I would move heaven and earth to spare her pain." "You can't spare her this pain," Eleanor said sadly. "But you can help her survive it. That's all any of us can do. Help each other survive the unsurvivable." The weeks that followed established a new rhythm at Thornwick Manor. Eleanor's presence in the ducal household raised eyebrows among the staff, but Mrs. Winters quashed gossip with ruthless efficiency. Miss Hartley was a family friend, the official story went, and the child was a distant relation being raised at Thornwick for private reasons that were nobody's business but His Grace's. Caroline adapted to her new surroundings with the flexibility of the very young. The nursery became her domain, and she ruled it with benevolent toddler tyranny. She demanded stories from Eleanor, horsey rides from Lucian, who found himself on his hands and knees more often than he'd ever imagined a duke could be, and insisted that her stuffed rabbit, imaginatively named Bunny, be included in all meals. But it was the nights that revealed the truth of their situation. Eleanor's coughing fits grew worse as winter deepened. She would muffle them in handkerchiefs that came away spotted with blood, and Lucian would find her sitting by the nursery fire in the early morning hours, too exhausted to return to bed. "You should be resting," he told her, one such morning, finding her there at 3 a.m. with Caroline sleeping peacefully in the nearby crib. "Can't sleep," Eleanor said simply. "Lying down makes the coughing worse, and I don't want to wake Caroline." Lucian pulled up a chair beside her without invitation. "Dr. Hashton says there are opiates that could ease your symptoms, let you rest. Opiates cloud the mind. I want to be clear-headed for whatever time remains." Eleanor managed a wan smile. "Besides, I don't mind the nights. It gives me time to think, to prepare." "Prepare for what?" "For saying goodbye." She looked at Caroline's sleeping form. "I've been writing letters, for her, to be opened on important days,
Her first day of school, her 16th birthday, her wedding day, things I want her to know but won't be here to tell her. Lucian felt his throat tighten. She'll treasure those. I hope so. Eleanor was quiet for a moment, then said, I've been thinking about Lady Isabel, about what she must have felt, knowing she might die and leave her daughter motherless. It's a special kind of agony, loving someone so much and knowing you won't be there to protect them. You've protected Caroline more than you know. You've given her 2 years of love and security. You've brought her to a place where she'll be safe and cared for. That's no small thing, Miss Hartley. Eleanor, she corrected gently. If we're to share these vigils, you might as well use my Christian name. Eleanor, then. Lucian liked the sound of it, the simple intimacy it implied. And you should call me Lucian, at least in private. That wouldn't be proper, Your Grace. Very little about this situation is proper. A dying governess and a grieving duke keeping watch over a daughter who shouldn't exist according to all the rules of polite society. He smiled without humor. I think we're beyond propriety at this point. Eleanor laughed, then immediately regretted it as the sound dissolved into coughing. Lucian handed her a clean handkerchief and waited while the fit passed. I'm sorry, she gasped when she could speak again. Don't apologize. You're dying, Eleanor. The least I can do is bear witness to it with you. The words were brutal in their honesty, but Eleanor seemed to find comfort in them. Too many people, Lucian suspected, had tried to soften the truth or offer false hope. The straightforward acknowledgement of what was coming must have been almost a relief. They sat together in the firelight, two people brought together by impossible circumstances, keeping watch over a sleeping child who would soon lose the only mother she'd ever known. Tell me about yourself, Lucian said eventually. All I know is that you served Isabel before her marriage and that you've sacrificed everything for Caroline. But who were you before all of this? Eleanor seemed surprised by the question. No one important. My father was a country vicar. I was educated enough to work as a companion or governess, which is how I came to serve Lady Isabel when she was 17. We were close in age and became friends, though I was always aware of the difference in our stations. And after Isabel married, you didn't come to Thornwick with her? No. Her father hired a more experienced lady's maid for her new position as a duchess. I was let go, given a good character reference and 6 months' wages. I found work with another family, teaching their daughters. It was a good position. Eleanor's voice grew distant. I was there when Isabel's letter came. She was 4 months along and terrified. I didn't hesitate. I gave notice to my employers and went to her at Pemberton Hall. You gave up a secure position to help a friend. That's no small thing. She needed me. Or rather, Caroline needed me. Even then, before I'd met her, I knew this child would need someone. Eleanor's hand rested on her chest, over the lungs that were slowly failing her. I just didn't know it would cost me everything. Do you regret it? Never. The answer came without hesitation. These 2 years with Caroline have been the happiest of my life. She made me a mother, even if not by blood. She gave me purpose and love and joy I never expected to have. If I could go back and choose differently, knowing what it would cost, I would make the same choice every time. Lucian found himself profoundly moved by her quiet certainty. Here was someone who had given everything, health, resources, future, for a child who wasn't even her own, without expectation of reward or recognition. It was a kind of love he had never witnessed before, and it made his own careful, dutiful existence feel small by comparison. I wish I had known you before, he said, before all of this. I think you might have taught me something valuable about what matters. You're learning it now, Eleanor said gently. I see the way you look at Caroline, the way you've transformed from a man frozen in grief to a father learning how to love. That's not nothing, Lucian. That's everything. Caroline stirred in her sleep, making a small sound of distress. Both adults were on their feet instantly, but Eleanor reached the crib first. She hummed a low melody, and Caroline settled immediately, soothed by the familiar sound. "She'll remember that," Lucian said quietly. "When you're gone, she'll remember your voice, the songs you sang, the way you made her feel safe." "I hope so," Eleanor whispered. "God, I hope so." They returned to their chairs, and Lucian found himself saying, "When the time comes, and I pray it's further off than we fear, you'll be buried in the family plot, next to Isabel. The woman who brought you here and the child you raised will both be nearby. It seems fitting." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. "That's more honor than I ever expected, Your Grace." "Lucian," he corrected gently. "Lucian," she repeated, and smiled through her tears. "Thank you. For Caroline, for the letters, for the burial plot, for treating me like family when I'm nothing but a servant who overstepped." "You're not nothing," Lucian said fiercely. "You're the woman who brought me back to life when I'd given up on living. You're the reason I have a daughter, a purpose, a future beyond empty duty. Don't ever diminish what you've done, Eleanor. Don't ever call yourself nothing." She nodded, unable to speak, and they sat in companionable silence as the fire burned low and the first light of dawn began to creep through the windows. It was the first of many such vigils they would share in the months to come. Christmas came to Thornwick Manor with a tentative joy that had been absent from the house for years. Mrs. Winters supervised the decoration of the entrance hall with pine boughs and holly. Cook prepared a feast that was far too large for 3 people, and Caroline, experiencing her first Christmas that she was old enough to remember, approached the whole affair with wide-eyed wonder. "Tree!" she announced with delight when Lucian brought her to see the evergreen that had been installed in the drawing room. "Big tree!" "It's beautiful, isn't it?" Eleanor stood beside them, wrapped in a shawl despite the warm fires. She was thinner now, her face drawn with exhaustion, but she smiled as Caroline tried to count the candles waiting to be lit. Lucian had commissioned gifts for both of them. For Caroline, a rocking horse far finer than the one in the nursery, painted white with a real horsehair mane and tail. For Eleanor, a locked box of carved rosewood containing the deeds to a cottage on the Thornwick estate and a substantial bank account in her name. "The cottage comes with staff," he explained when she opened it with shaking hands. "A housekeeper, a cook, a daily maid. They're instructed to care for you to maintain the property as your private sanctuary. You won't die in the nursery, Eleanor. You'll have your own place, your own peace when the time comes." Eleanor couldn't speak. She simply clutched the box to her chest and wept, while Caroline, oblivious to the gift's significance, tried to interest her in the ribbons and paper scattered around them. But the most meaningful moment came late that night, after Caroline had been put to bed, exhausted by excitement and excess. Lucian and Eleanor sat together in the drawing room, the candles on the tree lit and casting dancing shadows across the walls. "I need to tell you something," Eleanor said, "about Isabel. Something I wasn't sure I should share, but you have a right to know." Lucian tensed. "What is it?" In her last letter, the one she wrote 3 days before Caroline was born, she wrote about you. Eleanor's voice was soft. "She said she'd been wrong to fear telling you about the baby. She said she'd realized, too late, that beneath your cold exterior was a man capable of great love. She just didn't know how to reach past the walls you'd both built." "Eleanor, let me finish." Eleanor pulled a folded paper from her pocket. The letter, Lucian realized, that he'd thought was the last one. She wrote, "Tell him, if I don't survive, that I'm sorry. Sorry for being too afraid to give our marriage the vulnerability it needed. sorry for sending our daughter away instead of trusting him with the truth. And tell him that if he can find a way to love Caroline the way I wish we had learned to love each other, then my life will not have been wasted." The words landed like blows. Isabel, dying, had thought of him, had tried to reach across the chasm between them one final time. "She also wrote something else," Eleanor continued. "She wrote, 'I hope he marries again. I hope he finds someone who can teach him what I could not. That love is not performance or duty, but genuine connection. He deserves that. Perhaps in another life we both could have found it together. But in this one, the best I can do is give him a daughter who might save him from the loneliness we both suffered.'" Lucian's vision blurred. He had spent 3 years mourning a woman he'd never really known, building a shrine to a marriage that had been hollow at its core. And all the while, Isabel had been hoping for him to find something more, something real, even if it meant moving beyond her memory. "She loved you," Eleanor said gently. "Not the way a wife loves a husband, perhaps, but she loved you enough to want your happiness, even at the cost of her own pride. That's worth something, Lucian." "It's worth everything," he managed to say. "And she gave me Caroline, our daughter, who represents all the love we should have shared but couldn't." He looked at Eleanor through tears he no longer tried to hide. "And she gave me you, someone who understood Isabel in ways I never could, someone who's teaching me how to be the father and the man I should have been all along. I haven't done anything special." "You've done everything special," Lucian interrupted. "You've shown me what it looks like to love without reservation, to sacrifice without complaint, to face death with grace and still worry more about those you're leaving behind than your own suffering." He reached across the space between them and took her hand. "I don't know how to thank you for that, Eleanor. I don't know if there are words." Eleanor's fingers closed around his, her grip surprisingly strong despite her failing body. "Then, don't use words. Just promise me you'll remember everything I've taught you about Caroline. Promise me you'll love her enough for both of us." "I promise," Lucian said. "On my honor, on Isabel's memory, on everything I hold sacred, I promise." They sat together in the candlelight, hands clasped, while the Christmas tree glowed beside them, and somewhere above, Caroline slept in innocent oblivion to the adult grief and love swirling around her. It was, Lucian thought, the best Christmas he'd ever had, and the worst. Both truths held equal weight in his aching heart. January brought bitter cold and the slow, inexorable decline Eleanor had predicted. She moved to the cottage Lucian had given her, partly for her own comfort, and partly to spare Caroline the daily witness of her deterioration. But Caroline was brought to visit every day, and Eleanor would rally her strength to play and sing and tell stories, preserving as much normalcy as she could. Lucian was there too, more often than not. He would sit quietly in the corner while Eleanor and Caroline interacted, learning the rhythms of their relationship, memorizing the way Eleanor soothed Caroline's tantrums or made her laugh or taught her new words. He was studying to become the parent Caroline would need when Eleanor was gone. Sometimes, in the evenings, after Caroline had been taken back to the manor, Lucian would remain. He and Eleanor would talk about everything and nothing, childhood memories, favorite books, the changing seasons on the moors. They never spoke about her impending death, though it hung between them like a held breath. "I never thought I'd find this," Eleanor said one evening in late January. They were sitting by her cottage fire, the wind howling outside. Friendship, I mean, real friendship, without the constraints of class or propriety. "I never thought I'd want it," Lucian admitted. "After Isabel died, I convinced myself that solitude was safer, that feeling nothing was preferable to feeling loss. And now?" Now I think I was an idiot, he smiled without humor. I've felt more in the last 2 months than I did in the previous 3 years. It's exhausting and painful and absolutely vital. You did that, Eleanor. You and Caroline. You reminded me what it means to be alive. Good, Eleanor said simply. Then I can die knowing I left something meaningful behind. Don't. The word came out sharper than he intended. Don't talk about dying as if it's already happened. You're still here. You're still Eleanor. I'm dying, Lucian. It's not morbid to acknowledge it. It's just true. She looked at him with infinite gentleness. And I need you to be ready. When I'm gone, Caroline will need you to be strong. She'll need you to be certain. You can't fall apart the way I can see you want to. How am I supposed to? His voice broke. How am I supposed to watch you die and then immediately be strong for Caroline? I'm not made of stone, Eleanor. I care about you. More than I should, probably, given the circumstances. More than is wise. Eleanor's eyes widened slightly. Lucian. I know, he interrupted. I know it's impossible and inappropriate and far too late, but I need you to know before the end. You matter to me, not just as Caroline's caretaker or Isabel's friend, but as yourself, as Eleanor. You matter. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, You matter to me, too. More than I expected. More than I planned for. A tear slid down her cheek. If I had more time, if circumstances were different, I think we could have been... She trailed off, unable or unwilling to finish the thought. Friends, Lucian supplied gently. More than friends, Eleanor whispered. But we don't have time for more. We barely have time for what we've already found. Lucian moved from his chair to kneel beside hers, taking both her hands in his. Then let's not waste what we have. Let's be honest with each other, at least. No more pretending. No more careful distance. All right, Eleanor agreed. Honesty. I'm terrified. Not of dying. I've made my peace with that. But of leaving Caroline. Of not being there to see her grow up, to see her become the remarkable woman I know she'll be. That breaks my heart more than anything. She will be remarkable, Lucian said with certainty, because she has you in her foundation, and because I will spend every day of my life making sure she knows how much her Eleanor loved her. Promise me something, Eleanor said urgently. Promise me you won't let her forget me. Tell her stories about our time together. Keep the letters I've written for her. Make sure she knows that I didn't choose to leave her, that I would have stayed forever if I could. I promise, Lucian said. She'll know you, Eleanor. Through my stories, through your letters, through the way I love her, she'll know you. Eleanor pulled one hand free and touched his face gently. You're going to be an extraordinary father, because you taught me how. They stayed like that, his hands holding hers, her palm against his cheek, while the fire burned low and the wind rattled the windows. It wasn't romance exactly. It was something deeper and more desperate. Two souls finding each other in the shadow of death, offering comfort and connection in the brief time allowed. Later, Lucian would remember this as the moment he truly understood what Isabel had been trying to tell him in that final letter. Love wasn't duty, or performance, or careful politeness. It was this: raw honesty, vulnerable presence, the courage to feel deeply, even when feeling deeply meant inevitable pain. Eleanor had taught him that, and for the rest of his life, he would be grateful. Eleanor Hartley died on a gray February morning when the moors were covered in frost and the sky promised snow. She went peacefully, in her sleep, in the cottage Lucian had given her. The housekeeper found her just after dawn and sent word immediately to the manor. Lucian arrived within minutes, though he already knew. Somehow, he had known the moment he woke that Eleanor was gone. He sat beside her bed for a long time, holding her cold hand, memorizing her peaceful face. She looked younger in death, the lines of pain and exhaustion smoothed away. At rest, finally, from a body that had betrayed her too soon. "Thank you," he whispered to her still form, "for everything, for Caroline, for teaching me how to love her, for letting me know you, even briefly. Thank you." The funeral was small and private. Just Lucian, Mrs. Winters, Dr. Ashton, and a handful of staff who had grown fond of the quiet woman in the cottage. Caroline was too young to attend, left in the care of a nursemaid at the manor. Lucian would tell her later when she was old enough to understand. Eleanor was buried in the family plot, on Isabel's right side, the position of honor. The stone Lucian commissioned for her read, "Eleanor Hartley, beloved friend and mother. She loved greatly and was greatly loved." That night, Caroline cried for Eleanor. She didn't understand where her Ellie had gone, why she wasn't coming back, why everything was suddenly different and wrong. Lucian held his daughter while she sobbed, feeling his own tears fall into her dark curls. "Ellie's gone to heaven," he said, the explanation Eleanor had prepared him to give. "She was very sick, darling, and now she's with your mama. They're both watching over you from heaven. They both love you so much." "Want Ellie!" Caroline wailed. "Want Ellie back!" "I know, sweetheart, I know. I want her back too." Lucian rocked her gently. "But Ellie gave me something very special before she left. She gave me you, and she made me promise to love you and take care of you and make sure you're happy. Can you help me keep that promise?" Caroline hiccuped, her sobs quieting to sniffles. "How?" "By letting me be your papa, by teaching me how to make you smile, by staying with me and being brave even when you're sad." He kissed the top of her head. "Ellie told me you were the bravest girl she ever knew. She said you could do anything. Will you show me how brave you are?" Caroline nodded against his chest, her small fingers clutching his shirt. "Stay with Papa?" "Yes, darling, you stay with Papa. Forever and always, I promise." It wasn't enough. No words would be enough to fill the Eleanor-shaped hole in Caroline's world. But it was a beginning, a foundation on which they could build, together, a new life from the ruins of old grief.